Hey, Geekscapists, welcome to a brand new Geekscape podcast. I'm Jonathan London, your host. And if this is your first Geekscape, strap yourselves in for some pop culture talk. I've been doing the show since 2005, 2006, talking to you online about comics. And let's see, we've had everybody from we had Stan Lee, we had Simon Pegg, Felicia Day was very early. I think Felicia Day was like episode 8. I don't know. If you're just discovering Geekscape for the first time, that's what I like to do. I like to talk to creative people about pop culture. What maybe they're involved in video games, maybe they're involved in TV, film, maybe they're an actor or actress. Maybe they're just a fan like you. I loved last episode, just hanging out with Angelica Trey and talking about Mario and video games and how she blew up on TikTok, dressing up in cosplay and having some funny sketches. That's a really fun episode, and it's very review heavy. So if you want to know what we think about everything from the Dungeons and Dragons movie to Super Mario Brothers and more, that's a really good informational episode for you. If you want to catch up on some of the news and reviews that are going on right now, this episode is I previewed it last week. This episode I've been looking forward to for a while. I always love talking to filmmakers. As a filmmaker myself, I just love talking story, and I've got a great one. Adam Schomer is a documentarian. He came to me through my friend Kenny. Kenny was in my running group a couple of years ago, and then Kenny just found me on Facebook. I'm in my 40s. I'm still on Facebook. And Kenny said, I got a story for you. Now, listen, people do that all the time. They're always like, hey, I got a buddy. He's got a man cave. You should have him on Geekscape. I usually don't have them on Geekscape. Every day somebody says you should have this person on Geekscape. Ultimately, I have to be interested. Like, you'll be surprised sometimes somebody who I've heard of, somebody who's pretty cool, they're not right for Geekscape. And ultimately, it all just comes down to, can I talk to them for an hour? Am I interested to talk to them for an hour? I do the show as much for you as I do for myself. Yeah, I have to. I've been doing this 16 years. And Kenny started out with the fatal first words. Hey, man, I got a guest for Geekscape. And I was like, oh boy, Kenny is not a geek. I think Kenny's like an accountant or something. Like, I love Kenny, but I was like, all right, let's see what he suggests. I thought he was going to be like, there's this, I don't know what he was going to suggest. The bagging guy at my grocery store, he keeps mumbling about Batman. You should have him on Geekscape. I was like, here it comes. Instead, Kenny said, my friend Adam is doing a documentary, and I'm just going to send you the link to the film that's in production now. And the story behind it is incredible. It involves family legacy. It involves all sorts of stuff. But I previewed it last week by saying that this family, Darren, who's going to be on the show talking about it, inherited his father's comic book collection, and he had a pretty tough relationship with his father. And I'll let him use his own words. But when this collection was a huge comic collection of classic Golden Age, Silver Age comics, including one of the 2 highest rated CGC graded issues of Action Comics #1. This is a $3-4 million book. This is real money, and they're inheriting this legacy from their father, as well as this incredibly valuable comic book collection. The Action Comics just is the top of it. That's just the big book, but there's tons of big books probably in this thing. And you know what comes with it when you lose a family member, and then you inherit this stuff and you inherit this legacy. Is it financial? Is it emotional? It's all of those things. So we're gonna pick through it. And I think the movie Selling Superman immediately got my interest. Adam's here to talk about making the film. Darren's here to tell you the story behind the film, of the family and the comic book collection. We're gonna get into it. So I'm really happy you're here. If you think this is your thing, please hit a share button right now if you're watching live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. And if you're listening to this on your drive, maybe at work or something, when you get to where you can stop and safely access your podcast player, hit the share button and send it to a friend and be like, dude, you got to hear this story. And I can't wait to hear it as well. I have Adam and Darren on the show to tell you all about it. Coming up, we're going to be talking all about Selling Superman. All right, Geekscapists. Let's get right into it. I've got Adam Schomer here. He's my buddy Kenny's grocery bagger who mumbles about Batman. I'm kidding. He's a filmmaker. He's made many documentaries, and that's enough to get on Geekscape. I just love talking to filmmakers. But the subject matter of this current film, it went straight to what Geekscape's about. It's about pop culture, but it has a bit of depth to it. Adam, come on here and tell me about.
How'd you know? I love the grocery store so much. I really do. I'll never stop grocery shopping.
So how do you know Kenny? Because Kenny just sent me this Facebook. I was like, you got to have this guy on the show to talk about this movie he's making, and the movie sounds incredible.
And real quick, it's a Superman #1, not Action Comics one. Just so
okay, Superman #1. It's guys, you got the gist of it. $3 to $4 million book, I think.
Yeah, insane. And you'll find out later, I'm not like a huge comic book nerd. So I when I heard those numbers, I almost
that was Adam. Everybody, he was on the show. I'm kidding.
Yeah, exactly.
The second I said I wasn't into comics, he kicked me off the show. No, I'm kidding.
Superheroes, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars. Yeah, of course, right. But Kenny was in my yoga class. I taught yoga a long time ago, and that's how we became buddies. And Kenny, I think, is a real estate agent. So they're really always good at staying in touch with people, right? That's their business.
Kenny, I'm sorry I called you an accountant. Real estate. It was something something like you had spreadsheets in there, and something makes my nose
jovial. Yeah, jovial guy. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I posted on Facebook because I'm as old as you, and he found out about it. I'm glad he connected us. Real honored to be here. This is great.
Well, the story is just great. I know we got Darren waiting in the wings to talk about his family story and this whole thing, but how did you get involved with selling Superman?
Yeah, it's one of the calls you love to get as a documentary filmmaker, where someone says, "Hey, similar, can I be on your show?" Or I got a movie for you. But I love hearing people out, because you never know. And in this case, Darren and I went to high school together. We played soccer together. He's a couple years younger, and we had been in touch more recently because of tech. He has a tech business, really successful man in the tech world. And he said, there's something you don't know about me. And there's a 40-year family secret that really nobody knew about. A handful of people knew about. My dad obsessively collected comic books, for 40, 50 years. And B, he had Asperger's, and this just really wasn't talked about at all. And he said, my father passed and has left me 300,000 comic books and a Superman 1. And Adam, this could be worth $3.5, $4 million. And, my mind as a filmmaker immediately went to, why do we value things the way we do? Why do we love superheroes the way we do? What's it mean to Darren? What's it mean to his father? And then, my gosh, then I went home to Michigan, which is where we're from, over Thanksgiving, to be like, hey, let's put him on camera, and got to know his mom and his brother, and everyone is so interesting. The family portrait, his good buddy Brian, who's been a comic geek forever, who had to painstakingly sit there and know all these books. He was one of the people that knew all these books were there. He was on the inner circle for 40 years. Just what's
it allowed you to see that you had a cast of characters that could carry a film.
Amazing cast of characters and a family portrait that just keeps. For me, jaw-dropping, emotional, a father-son story, mental health story, and the underbelly of an industry. It's fun, it's interesting, and Darren's been an open book. I mean, it's not easy to be in a film, so I always say hats off to him for letting us in on this, what I think is a pilgrimage, to have to go through your family legacy and a lot of pain, and in some ways be forced to look at it all and grow.
The family doc is tough. When you look at the family doc specifically, like you've got Sarah Polley, who just made a fiction film about a real subject, but her first film was about like, hey, who's my dad? Remember when Sarah Polley made that film? And it's just like, and then I've worked. I mean, I remember in undergrad trying to think about maybe doing a family film, and just the idea of that lens coming in and showing people what could amount to dirty laundry.
Yeah, it's
very complicated. And like, when does the cinema Heisenberg effect come in, where your subjects are being guarded? When does the presence of the camera change the subject to which you're trying to document?
I'll tell you, it does. No, and I'm fully real about that. It has to. There's the fourth wall is broken. We're part of the story, and I like that because that's more honest. We
Sure.
are affecting his journey because I love things that are real time. You know, I've done stuff where you're motorcycling through the Himalayas, and I just love a doc that has an adventure that's unfolding as we go, and we don't know the end.
So in a way, you are becoming a character as well, Adam.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're part of it because, you know, I can't say everything, but we affect his journey in a few dramatic ways, impactful ways. Yeah.
Okay, I know the film is still in the process of being created. Geekscape, if you go to sellingsuperman.com, you can put your email in there. You can be kept up to date with the production of the film, all that stuff.
Watch the trailer. Yeah, they can watch the trailer there.
Watch the trailer. There's like a 10-minute video. There's a bunch of stuff up. Is there the 10-minute videos up there?
Yep.
There's a bunch of cool stuff on sellingsuperman.com. But let's get Darren in here. We're talking about the guy. He might as well be able to fend for himself. Darren, were your ears burning?
Yeah, no, I'm listening. It's all true.
And Darren, are you a comic book guy? Are you a fan, or was this one of the things that, I mean, actually, I think talk about the relationship with your father, because that maybe dictated whether or not you were a comic book fan, if that makes sense.
That's correct. Comic book fan growing up, no. And as you'll find out more, you know, basically in this talk, and then of course in the film, you know, the comics were associated with resentment. They were associated with hidden privacy, secretism in our home. Superheroes and the stories behind them and what they meant, very much a fan. Do I collect comics now? I do, and it's not just because of the collection, but it's a way to, you know, share with especially my friend Brian, who Adam was talking about, and others I've met along the way. You know, so I've really understood that a lot of what makes this community is the relationships, and a lot of those have been forged through this process. But yeah, growing up, no, I had a disdain for them. I mean, they were not associated with pleasantries in our home. You know, my mother was extremely upset about how obsessive he became, and you know, we were talking about physical space. I mean, it started occupying room after room after room after room. You know?
Sure.
And people want to ask if he collected comics, and he really hoarded them. And there's a huge difference, right? A collector enjoys what they have. They're proud of it. They may observe it, look at it, share it with others. They're proud to usually, you know, say, oh, I just made this pickup, or, you know, whatever. Nothing like that. No comic ever surfaced in our home. They were not displayed. They were not talked about. And I think something important to say right away is it wasn't just comics. You know, there's as many sports cards as comics, if not more.
Wow.
The value isn't quite the same. What's that?
This film's going to have a sequel. Is that what you're telling me? Yeah, even, I mean, wow.
You know, you're talking to the guy on the other side right there. You know, I fully trust what he's done so far and what he thinks should be done. But no, the answer is there's such a depth. He collected books as well. You know, rare books about the occult, UFOs, you know, World War II. There's some stuff that was supposed to not escape Germany that's within the collection. I mean, haven't even gotten. But the fact is that I know it exists.
Yeah, and at like Darren, how were you? I mean, how do you even get close to a man like that as a son? How do you have brothers and sisters? Did y'all look out for each other? I'm guessing, or
well, I have a younger brother that I more look out for. My younger brother Adam, he's a couple years younger. He has some struggles of his own.
Sure.
He is learning disabled in school, and lived with my father up until my father's passing. So the fact is that was very difficult, you know, as well. So, but no, it was just pretty much me, in the sake of that sense. Yes.
And your father, he had his illness was, what did you say it was? It was Asperger's? No. And how debilitating was it? Does that make sense? Like, I think people function with Asperger's and
Absolutely.
They live fulfilling lives.
Absolutely.
But this sounds like, I mean, when I think of hoarding, I also think about those emotional. It's an emotional damage, not just a mental thing. As Asperger's, I mean, I'm Geekscapes, I'm really showing myself to know so little about Asperger's, even when my wife is a social worker who works with people on the spectrum. The emotional side of this with the hoarding, that seems like barriers being created between himself and others. That seems like someone trying to create defenses or at least distance between themselves and others.
Well, here's what I'd say, and I just talked about this earlier today in another setting like this, and we're not trying to paint a negative picture and even call it a disability. It's a condition, right? And here's the thing: people live with all kinds of conditions, right? People that have suffering eyesight wear glasses. People that need help walking may have a cane or something else. But it's recognized, it's realized, and it's admitted. The problem with this story is my father never admitted his condition, ever. And he was only passively diagnosed by us and through counselors that we would go to, that he would sometimes be a part of, to deal with some of that emotional damage that he was, putting us through. But he never, ever admitted that he had it. It would never seek any advice on dealing with it. So that was the challenge. It wasn't the condition. That's one of the biggest things I can make clear, is that, we've met several people along the way of this journey that have, somewhere on the spectrum, and they realize it and they cope and they understand how to deal with it and work with it. We've even had one of the best stories is, that Adam ran into someone at a con in San Diego that was dressed up as Superman. His girlfriend was right there. Her wife was right there, dressed up as Wonder Woman, and we're always gravitating to people that are Superman maximalists, because, that's what we are, sort of, here, or at least me. And, we started talking, and he very, very early volunteered. He said, listen, I've recently diagnosed with Asperger's, and I just like to tell people that. So if I do something that, may seem a little bit off or whatever, so basically he was, being very aware of it, and the fact that he wanted others to know that if there's anything that could be taken wrong or somewhat, that he was, in advance excusing himself from that, or at least making others realize it. And I think that's incredible. I've met several others along the way. There's this gentleman named Michael that I've become close to, that's very much on the spectrum, very aware of it, and he deals incredibly well with it. So that's not the problem. It's the problem of not admitting it, right? Not dealing with it, not understanding the impact, like you said, that it has on others, creating these barriers, not recognizing that they're not normal, even when being told how hurtful, even when watching my mom, go through an incredible amount of pain with it, and just thinking everyone else is off.
At that point, the denial becomes abusive.
Yeah, sure. If you want to name
or
it.
I mean, if anything, the metaphor of superheroes who live double lives, and the dichotomy of this denial is like, that's the thing with Superman, is like Kal-El is who he is. Clark is the lie.
That's exactly
and Clark is the forward-facing public image of this
100%.
person. And I'm guessing your father had a public image as well that he had to stay conscious of. But
Absolutely.
The home was being filled with things. I mean, not just the home, but the home is a metaphor for the human. Is becoming cluttered and unmanageable after a point.
Yeah, and that's the tangible physical part. Again, we could go on and on about, and
I love the subject. Yeah,
it's not a poor me thing at all. There's so many others that have varying circumstances with their parents. Different.
It won't be a poor me thing after you sell the collection. No, not at all.
What?
That was a joke.
Well, but that's something.
We were getting so serious. I had to make it dumb.
I know, right? I know.
That's something we go into a lot, though. Right, because to bring it back to that level of seriousness, when you do things like this and you put yourself out there, and you are in news articles or podcasts and YouTubes and things, and the movie hasn't even come out, you are going to be a target for hate, jealousy, trolls, keyboard cowboys, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, that's what I call them, keyboard cowboys.
One of the things that I've even been faced directly is, people be like, well, poor you, but remember, no one feels sorry for the rich guy, and
it's such BS.
It's funny stuff like that, because, that's something else we try to talk about is, I own 3 different businesses. I was doing very well before any of this. This doesn't change my life at all. I don't change my life one bit because of any of this. Is there monetary value? There is. Is there a lot of people we're helping? There is. Is there a lot of charities we're involved with? There is. But the fact is that it doesn't erase, the monetary outcome of this in no way erases, 44 years while he was alive in my life of experiences, sharing of things, treatment. And again, that spilled over to a lot of ways. There was never any pride recognition, no empathy, so that condition left unchecked can be incredibly dangerous for loved ones, where they're very misunderstood of what it is, especially when denied, because when he would deny it, it was like, well, okay, so you're telling me you have no handicap with this at all?
And as your father, you're being gaslit as you're being raised.
Exactly right. So then I guess you're just a jerk because you're making us feel all awful and unimportant and insignificant. And so if it's not something you can't help, then I guess it's intentional then, huh? And it was that kind of battle.
The denial at some point is intentional, would it not be?
I would say, yeah, he's saying the denial is intentional for sure. Protect himself, right? Your father.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, he didn't want to admit, and see the irony of this whole thing is he was a hypochondriac in so many other ways than health issues, but couldn't be about here. He would tell you all day long about his heart, atrial fibrillation he had that was totally managed. He would tell you all day long about his 4 retina detachments.
He thought he was going to die the next day.
He had incredibly, touch and go eyesight with the very advanced glaucoma that was unchecked as well in certain cases. So he'd tell you all about that. He'd get every single, bit of sympathy out of those things. But if you talk about something that was like, well, Dad, emotionally, maybe you have, oh, no. You guys are misunderstanding. Yeah. You're completely misinterpreting all this. So, yeah, that was kind of what it was. I mean, the comics were always, and the collectibles, I should say, the collectibles were always talked about as something for later. And it was always later.
Like an
later,
investment?
Later.
Or we'll deal with it later. We'll get these out of our house later.
Both.
Yeah.
If you watch that, make sure you watch that label video. The label video, the description of our custom label on CGC is underneath the trailer on SallySuperman.com. And I go into some of that of how we tried to, lay the portrait of the story out in that label, and what a humbling experience for CGC to approach us like that. You can do the best you can, but the fact is that he used to joke, and I talk about it in there. He used to joke that I'm like, so Dad, you got a lot of stuff here. What's going to happen later? And it wasn't about like, give it to me. It was like, hey, don't give it to me. Don't give it to me. Let's deal with this now. Have a plan, have a roadmap. Maybe we don't get through it all, but we can at least have a collective plan that is within your wishes, right? It's your stuff, not mine, nor do I want it. And I really didn't. And I still don't. Okay. And that doesn't mean that we just give things away. That's not what that means. It means that when you have the logistics of this situation, when you have all these comics, which are absolutely not in order, by the way, they're not in order.
Still
you don't go to a fantastic. Oh God, no.
In Geekscape, CGC is comics grading service. Is the comics grading company that goes and they bind these things in plastic and they lock in like really hard, not just plastic like bags and boards, but they lock this thing in and say, hey, if this is a 9.8, which is perfect, if they are 10 is perfect, but on a 10-point scale, if they grade your comics, and like most comics from the golden and silver age, I mean, those comics are probably 1s and 2s and 3s. Like they're ratty. They have, they have coffee stains on them. They're missing pages. I pulled a bunch of Avengers comics that I grabbed at Pasadena Comic Con, and I talked about on my TikTok, and the coupons are clipped out of them. And I as I'm going through these that I paid $1 for just to have for fun and revisit the stories, I'm turning pages and there's coupons cut out of these, and I'm laughing my butt off. Those are like zeros, and I don't know what those would be in CGC, but the comics gradings, this company has been around a while, and they approached you, Darren, or like,
okay, so how
so many stories here, and Adam, don't worry, you're not, we're going to talk about the film as well, but
no, everything you said is extremely accurate. And so the first thing to know is that not one article of this collection was graded on his passing, even though I had again begged him multiple times. I'm like, Dad, you got to get started on this. I'll help you. I'll go down to Sarasota, Florida, where CGC is. I'll go to PSA, which is where they grade cards. I'll help you. The logistics of it. We wanted to enjoy this as a family. We wanted to take part of it in a family. We wanted to have those aha moments, and my mother included at the time. Look through a box and be like, oh my God, look at this. Because he had so many and whatever that he wouldn't have even remembered what he had.
Sure.
Because he wasn't a collector. A collector is someone, again, that is methodical and has a list and knows what they want, and they have certain titles and they have certain genres, anything like that. Maybe they just collect art, as far as the artist.
Checking a checklist in my mind, like telling myself, like, which one, Jonathan, are you a hoarder? You're saying it, I'm like, because I have my storage unit in Van Nuys, and it's comics, and I'm like, oh, Jonathan, do you know what's in there? Are you a hoarder?
Well, and again, I'm not advocating that you can't be an investor and then just put things away and just sit. But what I'm trying to say is that there was no methodical rhyme and reason to it. Yes. Okay, he had stuff where he bought 150 copies of the same thing, 200 copies of the same thing, multiple times. Some of those things ended up being incredibly valuable because they were the right first appearances, or they were the right this and that.
Sure.
The thing about this collection is the average grade of this collection is incredibly high. So when you're talking about those old gold and silvers, not our comics. Our comics are beautiful. And the thing is, the reason for that is because he went and got them and put them in a box and never touched them, never looked at them, never anything. Ever
may not have even read them.
No, may not. Did not read them.
He didn't even read the comics.
No way.
That's the greatest thing about comics.
Well, who buys 150? You don't buy 150 to read them. Okay.
Of course, you read one.
Right,
but he didn't even read one, is what you're telling me.
No. I never saw that man read a comic book.
So you're the only comic book fan really in the family, and it took you through adolescence and early adulthood to get to that point.
I enjoy, like I say, the stories, and I enjoy debating with friends. I enjoy that intellectual piece of it. He did like that part in the beginning. That's what kind of got him into comics. This was kind of the intellectual debate on some of the powers versus powers. But
in the metaphor of it all, I think, is like,
he was not a reader. He was not a collector that way at all, one bit. CGC is an essential part of determining the value of the collection, because without them graded, you can't really say for sure. Now, there are collectors that like raw comics that are not graded, and listen, I consider them maybe even the biggest purists. They want them just how they're supposed to be, right off the rack, untouched, ungraded. They want to, like you said, touch them, feel them, smell them, everything in between. And that's awesome.
This guy.
It's the truth.
That's big dummy who's not going to make anything off his comics one day.
And that's cool, because the thing is that's a purist. It's for those reasons. But in our case,
and Brian's one of those too. His buddy's a purist. He's a raw guy. He's a Batman 100%. Guy. They go back and forth. Batman versus Superman.
Superman.
Brian smashes the plastic. We do have some fun in the film by doing
Brian,
that.
you and I, we can get along talking comics, but I'm a Superman guy myself when it comes to Batman.
Right. Well, we tell Brian all the time, no one's perfect. It's fine. But
just look at Gotham. And then look at Metropolis. Like, there's a reason Gotham looks like a toilet. Like,
hey, the arguments are on.
No offense, Brian, but that asylum ain't exactly fixing people.
That's true.
If only there was a billionaire who could invest in the infrastructure of this city, or like it's I don't know, the police.
These are good arguments we haven't heard yet in the film.
Are you serious? Like, look at Arkham Asylum. Like, if there's anything for like socialized healthcare, like they're failing big time on that Arkham Asylum. It's like a clown factory. It's like, what? Things are getting worse. These people are turning to the Joker for gigs because this billionaire is building siege weapons after embezzling from his publicly traded company. What the hell is wrong with this?
I'm in agreement.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
But the fact
meanwhile,
is
this alien who could turn us into food is like, no, I will inspire them to be good by being good.
That's right.
And I was like, dude, Batman has a bad day, a bank gets robbed. Superman has a bad day, we become food for Mongol. Like, come on. Not comparison.
Wow.
There's come on. Not comparable. Welcome to Geekscape.
Yeah, you're right.
Sorry about that. Geekscape is the movie's called Selling Superman. You can find more information at sellingsuperman.com. Let's get back to the movie. How long have you been shooting this thing, Adam?
Let's say a year. Although I mentioned
we've
November
made documentaries
21.
here at Geekscape, so like we made a few docs here at Geekscape. They take a while.
They take a while. November 21, we went and shot for a few days before the old house sold. So we got to, get the family in the old house and see where the books were and all that. And then we picked it back up May of 2022. We really started filming. We've been filming since then. So it'll probably be a year of shooting in the end. And then we're going to post real soon. So we should, early 24, we'll be done.
And our friend Chuck, I've never actually had Chuck on the show, but Chuck is like a luminary. He's like a big personality in comics because he runs Mile High Comics, which is one of the major collectors in the United States and probably worldwide. Geekscape, as they used to be at San Diego Comic-Con every year until it just wasn't profitable enough for them to bring the truck and go to San Diego from Denver every year or Colorado. Ian Kerner, Geekscape, who you would know by being on Geekscape regularly, did sell off his collection to buy a house, and he got married, and it was time to. I've been married twice. I've yet to sell my collection, but Ian got married and sold his collection, and he sold it to Chuck at Mile High Comics, and Justin was on an episode or two of Geekscape. We're all chatting together. Chuck is Justin's father-in-law, I believe, and so y'all interviewed Chuck. I'm like 2 degrees removed from Chuck, who runs Mile High Comics, who's a big name in buying and selling comics, because you see as a kid, you'd see these ads for Mile High Comics in the Marvel Comics, in the classified. It would be a big classified ad, or those ads buying comics, selling comics, Mile High Comics. It was the big name, and it still is. You see those ads going back to the 70s, and you put them in the film. Who else is in the movie besides the people that are involved directly in Darren's life and in the story?
Yeah, besides the family portrait, Matt Nelson, CGC, right? A couple of guys over at Heritage, Ed Jaster, historian Mark
Heritage
Zaid.
is an auction house. Geekscape is Heritage Auctions, yeah.
Monty Paul's a therapist. We just talked to Temple Grandin, who she has autism and is an autism expert. They made a film about her on HBO. She was fascinating, and she really also laid out the kind of the history of how Asperger suddenly got lumped in with autism and where it's different and where it's the same. And there is a big difference. There's a huge difference, to be honest. So that was interesting to talk with her. And she's, again, if you don't know her, she's really an incredible person. She's changed the whole meat industry, and talk about like what Darren said about just like using your difference for the best and learning what, where your weaknesses are, and just learning. And she's big. She was a huge fan of Superman. Like she was like, well, he's a moral guy. He's an ethics guy. He gets, he's kind of like the old school, like people need to work, roll their sleeves up and do good in the world. And like she was tearing up. Like she was really into this guy.
It's a very immigrant story. It's like we came here with nothing but our physical abilities, and that is all we can use. Whereas Lex Luthor is old money, and like that's why I think Lex is the great foil for Superman. And Superman is the physical, literally an immigrant. Meanwhile, you got Batman across the river beating up poor people. Take that, bum! I built a tank, and now it's like, what? Of course they're going to work for the Joker. He's the one hiring. If only there was a billionaire who could give us jobs. He's beating up a bunch of poor people with crowbars. Like, stop it.
And there's a
not a hero.
Not a hero. I mean,
Bruce, that's your solution? Come on. Bruce.
I'll let you guys can geek out on the Batman Superman.
Sorry,
but
continue. Sorry,
we brought in some of Darren's friends to have like almost like a little mini reality show fight over that, because it is an emotional film, but there needs to be time for levity to break that. And it's comics, it's comics. So we have some fun with that. And the hatchback kid who's in the trailer that Darren met before we had started filming and took a liking to, and he's such an inspiring kid. I mean, he's 24, but on his 3rd kidney transplant, and this guy is just bootstrapping, trying to make himself a comic dealer. And we love characters like that in the film to be able to follow. And, Darren in some ways helping them, and they're in some ways helping him, just as a good story would be.
Dude, and Adam, Darren, does the book get sold over the course of the film? Is that the story you want to tell? Because ultimately you're adhering to some form of an act structure when you're telling a story. No spoilers. Let's not spoil it here, but is that the goal in your life, Darren, is to sell the book? Is that your goal? And like, and really, let's talk about that Heisenberg effect. Are there times when Adam you're taking the lead from Darren on what the narrative is, but it's also Darren's life and his family, and he's dictating the lead at the expense of story for your film. How are you all doing that balancing act? And again, you are becoming a member of that, a subject of the film yourself. Like, who takes the lead on this stuff?
I'll just jump in and say that it's real life, right? It's Darren living his life, doing what he was doing. And at some point, maybe, the film pushes a timeline a little bit quicker, possibly, right? When, let's say, for example, when no one knew about the collection. Darren already has things set up, and he has the warehouse and such set up, but people don't know. And, for the film, it's nice to be able to cover that event of when he starts telling people. And like, we had a whole, we had to film the strategy meeting, him and Brian talking about when let's go to Comic-Con in Michigan and start talking to some dealers and see what we should start doing with this. And that's a big moment, because now it is going to be out there and public, and people know what you have, and it's only escalated. But I think it's possible some of those timelines pushed up because, hey, it's Comic-Con. This could be good for filming. Let's do it. And that's great because, or Darren can say if it's great or not, but you force the narrative in some way. You push people to do things maybe a little out of their comfort zone, which I say is great because I'm into growth. I make films that are of consciousness, and you have to have challenges in life to grow. And so, and if Darren calls me up, he knows he's not gonna, get the run of the mill stuff. I go to India a lot, and I push the limits. And so I don't know, maybe Darren can talk about, if he's felt, pushed by the film at all.
Yeah. Or ask for a timeout in that case and be like, hey, like, my family's just not ready for this, regardless of what the story needs to be for the film. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have there been times, Darren, where you're like, oh, timeout, this doesn't fit my reality?
Oh yeah, big time. But what's been amazing is that, Adam and I have grown as friends. Again, we were separated by time and a little bit of age. When 2 years difference when you're in high school is kind of like a big deal, back then. And now it's, of course, nothing. You know what I mean? But then when it's so by coincidence, just some of the people that Adam's brought to the table, one of the head directors of photography has become what I would consider an incredibly good friend to me. He's just an incredible human being, and I could call him right now and he dropped what he's doing and he talked to me about whatever, and he's just that guy. He lived with me for over 2 weeks when we were doing some filming, and he's just, so while there's some of the push that's been a challenge, that's been also there's also been an introduction of some really positive people. Again, of course, Adam included, and coming together more, and people he's brought to the table. And then just like Adam said, just some of the relationships we forged organically by going through it that have been an incredible support system. So I haven't been alone, which has been massive. And there are times where we're all filming, and there'll be a moment, and that Adam is incredibly sensitive as a filmmaker. I don't have much to compare it to because my first one, but incredibly sensitive to, like, all right, this is a very important moment emotionally for the film, but I also recognize that this is real and this isn't about the camera being on right now. So he's done a tremendous job for me in that. Again, not having much to compare it to, but this is a very hard thing for me, because not only is it making, and we talked about this recently, I did not have a good relationship with this man. This is my father, and when he passed, it in no way was like I would describe it as a relief, but it was a release a little bit, where I wasn't constantly getting bombarded by his criticisms or so on, even though of course I had my own life and everything. And this film has of course kept it very alive and relevant right in front of me,
while also codifying it regardless of what resolution you did or did not get.
True.
And so it's calcifying the emotions in a celluloid form, in a permanent, like it's really complicated stuff.
It is. And and again, I don't ever want to come across as like boo-hoo, but everyone has their thing and it's their emotions and what they're used to. And I am a private person in other parts of my life. I'm not one that likes the limelight, exposure. Our local paper, the Detroit Free Press, did a bit on us, and they got it because of heritage, and we made a big sale there. And no, not Superman.
No
no
spoilers here, Geekscape. You're gonna have to
I'll
watch
spoil that one. No, that auction was not here, or it's not Superman. But the fact of the matter is that it ended up going on the front page.
Hint, it's the other guy you've been shitting on the whole time.
Yeah.
Right.
They sold the Batman book. I can't even look at this guy anymore.
Exactly.
Between the child endangerment and everything else he does, like, I'm sick of Batman.
Right. But the fact is, no, seriously, I mean, all of a sudden I get pings, ding, 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 ding. And I was actually out of town at the time with Adam shooting, and I'm getting blown up by friends. They're like, dude, you're on the front page. And I was horrified. Yeah, absolutely horrified. Where others might be like, that's the coolest thing ever. And
these
again,
things are somewhere. These things are somewhere in a physical space, and there's a security concern with this
that's
collection.
A whole nother ballgame. Yeah, that's a whole nother ballgame.
Darren, your relationship with your father being distant and also some major semblance of disapproval is what it sounds like. Did it drive you to the level of success? And I'm not saying that justified the relationship or the actions that he did or didn't take, but it drove you, would you say, to at least the business success that you found as an adult? Do you still hear him?
I want to. It's so insane because I literally had this conversation today, and the thing is that the answer is completely true. I've been incredibly driven for a long time because I was ingrained with the fact that nothing is ever good enough. You're never going to get recognition or pride out of this person / others. And that's been a very effective yet unhealthy way to, and I'm realizing that and having to uncover that. So not only are you dealing with, just the past, and then there's the pressure, and then the haters, and then the trolls, and then the people saying you're doing everything wrong, and you're a greedy son of a bitch, and you're not doing this right.
You're exploiting your family, and this and that.
100%. And your mother, she's the worst person, which is insane. Well, right. It's easy to say that, but when you're dealing with that in tandem with all the other emotional things as well, it's just a lot coming at you, and then you're unfolding like, wait, holy shit, this is the way I am. A little bit. And whoa, I mean, it can become extremely heavy. And so the thing is that there's been, I'll tell you the truth, there's been a few times I said, Adam, we have to pull the plug on this. I can't do this. I can't.
Dirty laundry.
It's reached that point. And I started asking myself, what the hell am I doing this for? If it's not to be a household name, it's not to even have any fame. And last thing we need is to have everyone talking about us this way. What are we doing? And then that spiral of questioning. But then when you talk to people where they come up to you and they're like, hey, I really want to tell you how special this is to me. And I want to let you know that, this just, I don't know the film yet, but just the story in general has made me rethink how I collect and what impact it has on my family. I just had that at a con the other day, literally this last weekend.
Or their relationship with their father or
mother. The other way. It was a father worrying about how it's going to impact their kids and if they're dedicating too much time on their stuff, the collectibles, versus going out and playing ball with little Johnny. You know what I mean? So there's that impact, and then just the awareness of how damaging potentially, some of these conditions can be if they're unchecked, unrealized, and not admitted.
Yeah, and Geekscape is like this stuff that we collect, and Geekscape is we do this stuff, whether it's vinyl records or comic books or Pokemon, whatever we collect. Like none of us get to keep it. At the end of the day, this mausoleum that your father built, like you don't get to keep it, folks. You can't take it with you, and the only thing that you leave behind are the stories people tell about you. And this is the story in a way that you were telling about your father. And Adam, when you're editing this thing, as you're working your way through, you're probably you're working through the footage the whole time you're shooting and seeing where to zig and zag on the film and what to pursue and what dries up. I love the process. How much input is Darren able to give, or is he you have to kind of still at the same time protect your film and your story and be a filmmaker, or are you making the film with Darren in that way?
This is how I approach it. Number one, I've always said, hey, Darren, your pilgrimage is number one, meaning like you and your life and your health and your happiness is the number one important thing. So if this film ever has to sacrifice for your health, that's fine. You know, like, I don't care about an Academy Award or the blah, blah, blah. Like, okay, we have to be clear, because I've done films, you know, some very sacred trips and people are very emotional, and you have to honor that first. And okay, if the film isn't as good because of something, no problem. Right. So hopefully that, you know, builds the trust and allows someone to be more open as well too. But then secondly, you know, and I was just at a conference by documentary.org. I said just, but it was like probably 5 months ago. And they spoke about some people even having the characters sign releases at the end of a film, not even before, giving that much autonomy to people in a film to say, we want you to be okay with this because we're not exploiting you, you know? So in that way, you know, the way Darren and I work together, like, I'll be able to show him cuts and be like, you know, am I misrepresenting you, or am I doing something that's going to hurt your family here or your kids? And I approached him. I said, I really don't want to film your kids a lot because that's not their choice yet. So I'm not going to, let's not put them in the limelight. I can get enough little B-roll to show your dad. I don't need your kids, you know, and they're not really old enough to agree to that. So I don't think they should be on camera. And so that, I mean, that's how we get through it. Darren's been great. And in the end, you know, if something was just really too much, he, you know, he has the right to turn to me and go, this is not working.
What a mindful guy. Like, from the yoga to the trips to India to making movies that have impact and meaning, like, you're such a mindful filmmaker. Like, this is awesome. You know, I mean, the level,
well,
because you can be very manipulative as a filmmaker. I mean, you can shape the reality, quote unquote, reality of these stories. You can be incredibly manipulative in these things. And we've seen manipulative filmmakers, but I think when you get to family documentaries are my favorite documentaries because they go to the core of our relationships with each other. And I think you can go and you can subjectively document something that at the end of the day, you made your film about it. You can put it in a box, you walk away from it. The strings don't follow you. But in a family documentary where someone like a Darren is involved, and again, codifying, calcifying this relation, the legacy of his father and himself, in a sense, once the film is done, those strands are going to continue, and you have responsibility here that you don't have on other things. And you're a good dude, man. Well, regardless of what Kenny said about you, you're a good dude.
Regardless. Well, maybe that's where the yoga stuff helped. I'm glad I did it since I was 18, meditating and such. But Thich Nhat Hanh, can you
levitate?
I cannot, but Yoda's my dude.
Okay, just had to ask.
So I've always
had to derail the conversation.
It's a fair question. I mean, you know, and these people that do the bouncing where they say they're levitating as yoga, I'm like, come on.
While they're sitting down, they can bounce off their cheeks.
Well, go look it up. It's kind of to me, it's a little bit.
But it's like wacky. A yoga thing. It's like, I'm so enlightened that I can bounce.
The powers are just not what you're seeking anyway. Right. But that's part of my thing. I get to look at like what these powers we seek, and you know, is this the mentality? Do the superheroes much focus on the powers, and does that have an impact on us? That's stuff I want to look at in the film as well. But in terms of like Thich Nhat Hanh, this Buddhist, right? He said, if we're making a film about, if we're going to make a film,
I don't know him, but the Vietnamese,
Vietnamese. So he said, if we're going to make a film about me, everyone that's making this film about me and mindfulness and such has to be practicing it. He's like, because then it's total hypocrisy. If you're stressing out making a film about, you know, mindfulness, he's like, we have to make the thing in the way it is. So if we're making a film that talks about mental health, and we're making a film that does show growth, you know, then we have to live it. You know, if I'm asking Darren to have faith, I better have also faith too. You know, I can't manipulate. I should trust in the story. If I'm asking him to trust me, I have to trust that things will happen.
What's incredible is my producer, Noam. He's my filmmaking producer. He was best man at my wedding. He actually put out a comic book about him, I cannot pronounce his name for the life of me. And my therapist brings him up every week or so because, you know, I don't have religion in my life, but I have some level of spirituality, probably Buddhism to a degree. And this, I mean, and he died within the last year or two, you know, and it's just like, it's such a great story. And I'm over at my producer's house, and he knows I'm a comic book person, and I see these things lying there. I'm like, what is that? He goes, I made a comic book about him. to tell the story about him.
Oh,
Yeah, I have one, and I have one in my in like
cool,
my
man.
bedroom. And he made a comic book. I should connect you and Noam as a just even as filmmakers on this stuff.
That'd be great.
Geekscape is the one thing I want you to do for sure is go to sellingsuperman.com, check out these trailers, learn a bit about Darren's story and the story that Adam's putting together with Darren. It's such a great story and it is so layered, which is why I wanted y'all to come on here and not just be like, so what comics you got? Yeah, because like
right.
that's you Geekscapists know that's never what I want to do on Geekscape. I love talking about storytelling and the depths of it, even if we just do it for an hour. Our good friend Don Nguyen, he's watching on Facebook, and he's a comic creator himself. He's awesome. He says, incredible story, just wanted to come in and to say hi. Well, hi Don, I love you, man. Don has helped me with storyboards in the past. He's an incredible storyteller himself, and I love it whenever storytellers get something out of Geekscape and the good conversations. I mean, I do the show, like I said in the intro, for myself to just meet people, hear amazing stories, which is what I love. And Geekscape is sellingsuperman.com. That's where you can keep up with this stuff and see where it is. I'm guessing you're aiming for some 2024, somewhere in there. You're going to release this film or put it all together. What a mountain of work.
Yeah, wow. Mountain of work. That's the fun part, though. Post-production is fun. Mm-hmm. It's all fun because we get to enjoy the adventure. But yeah, in post, you really get to really piece these things together. It's a challenge. If it wasn't a challenge, we wouldn't love it. Well, and like 24, truth, we should be in festivals. Yeah.
The quote unquote truth gets like making documentaries. Whenever I'm making one, and it's like the thing you have to like. And maybe it's harder for Darren, who's not a filmmaker, but like maybe it's not. I mean, he can see it. Darren's a smart, but like. When you get that footage, and it's true in fiction films, and sometimes there's no line between fiction and nonfiction films, but the quote unquote truth of it, when you get the reality of the footage together, the truth is gone. The reality is there of what you shot within the edited frames that you chose to already. Yeah. I mean, when you point a camera, you're editing already, and you have to find the truth in the broad stroke journey that the footage starts to reshape. So like in the editing is really where the truth, big quotes, of your story comes back, and where the real thing comes back to you. It's because it's easy to lose it on the journey. And maybe that's life, like maybe that's life. It's like it's easy to lose along the journey, like it's one of the best screenwriting pieces of advice I got ever was the first half of your script is a character pursuing what they want, and the second half of the script is a character realizing and pursuing what they need. And I said, oh no, that's a midlife crisis. And I was like going through my midlife crisis as I was up in Stowe, Vermont at the Story Labs, like as a screenwriter. And I heard this and I was like, bro, like you're actually like in survival mode right now, trying to realize what you need for the rest of your life after pursuing simply what you want for the first half of your life, and finding yourself bankrupt in a lot of places. Not a bad person, just not satisfied and not fulfilled as your life. And I mean, film is a metaphor, and that's why we love it, right? Darren, we're going to get you to make a movie, man. You're in now. You're in, bro. You're living with a cinematographer.
No, we're in. And honestly, if I didn't know Adam and I had not seen his prior work, and known how he, or at least had a lot of faith in how he'd approach it, I would never agree. So again, it's just hats off to him 100%. And, he's right. I mean, this has been a therapeutic process. It's been very hard, but, he's always been there to, reach the hand down and pick me up, but, so have others too on it. And, we just hope that people realize this isn't, just about collectibles, and it is about meaning, and it's not just, and definitely not just a money grab, and
take that Star Wars Jedi 384 wherever, maybe threw some mud at you on the internet. Like that is so awful.
No. It'll come. Yeah, it'll come after. It'll come no matter what. Yeah. I'm fully recognition of that. But what I've always said is understand us and then hate. Yeah. Don't hate before you understand.
I think that's all there's a T-shirt. Who has this T-shirt? Oh, it's us. Don't hate, create. Yeah, our
don't
shirt.
Hate, create.
Our slogan
I love
is
that.
Don't hate, create. Like it's all energy expenditure. I looked up, I was like, oh, it's all energy expenditure. Like I could sit here on Twitter and fight this person, or I could just write somewhere else that's productive and create something. I could sit here in my anger and stew at somebody that will never give me back the energy I'm putting into it, or I can just create something with it. It's like it's not making sense after a while. Don't hate.
I love that you're going back to, like you said, like the thread or the controlling idea. I knew the controlling idea pretty early in the film, and like what we want to say, and then you watch the universe kind of throw some things to make it cooler.
You adjust the film. Then the film is an organism.
Yep.
It is.
Like that's the coolest thing about it is like people are like, oh, no, it's an organism. Stories are organisms, and
that's just it. There's no roadmap for this, right? There's no script. There's no roadmap. There's no. If someone has a document out there that says, hey, if you inherit a million independent collectibles, here's what you're supposed to do. Please send that my way. I appreciate that very much.
And that's just the surface version of that conversation without any talking about the emotional legacy or any of that.
Right. Well, that's what I mean. So all we're doing is doing what we would do, and sometimes there's a camera there.
Yeah.
And that's really how I've told some people before. I mean, and that's really the truth. I mean, we're not actors. We're not making anything up. We're not making something more interesting because it would be more interesting. I mean, we're just, the camera.
Well, except when I tell Brian, let's have you smash that CGC plasma. I'm like, let's do that like to the Beastie Boys in your head, slow mo. But because you gotta have fun.
You got a little the Nuke of the North there on them. Is that what you did? Like, go stand over there, wait for the camera, put the Hulk hands on. Yeah,
but all that was is a personification of what he feels already.
The truth.
Exactly.
Is that Robert Flaherty? Robert Flaherty, who would have his subjects like wait for camera, and they're like freezing in the Arctic. Like, dude, are you kidding me? Like, did you do that to him? You made him climb Robert Flaherty, Geekscape, is Google it. Like, none of his subjects really turned out too well, but he was also turn of the century documentarian who was working in extreme conditions, and it got away from him. Nuke of the North, the original Marana. That's all it is. Okay, film school ever. Geekscape is sellingsuperman.com. Can't say it enough. I love this story. I cannot wait to see what y'all come out with, knowing that the story is bigger than the film ever can possibly be. And but the film is what we will live with, and I cannot wait to see it, guys. And any support you need from Geekscape, we're here for you. And
thank you.
Maybe we'll see you in San Diego Comic-Con this summer.
Yeah, a friend of mine was just talking about pitching a panel with us on it. So I would, it would revolve around mental health. So I think we'll be there.
We will be there too. I believe our booth is for the last 10 plus years has been $39.19, and I pitched a fun panel last week too. So I hope to be moderating that panel at Comic-Con too, and I'll tell you all about it once it gets accepted. And I hope it gets accepted because we have some fun former Geekscapists guests on there. And love you guys. Geekscapists, as I said earlier, check out sellingsuperman.com. Thank you so much, Adam and Darren, for being on the show with me. I loved it.
Pleasure. We can talk for hours, man.
I know we can. And don't hate, create, Geekscapists. If you learn anything on this one, don't hate, create. And we'll see you next week with another. I think I know who I have on the show. And I got to lock it up. I got to lock it up. Kenny would be great. I'm going to. I think I know who I have coming on the show, but I have not confirmed it yet. But she's awesome, and she would be a great guest, and she wants to do the show, so we just have to find the right time to do it.
I'll call Brie Larson for you.
I love Brie Larson, and I love that stuff. But Geekscape, see you next time. Share it with your friends. Leave us those 5-star reviews, all that podcast stuff. All right, peace.